I really wasn't anticipating this just falling. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we continue with part 2 of the Shelby GT350 engine rebuild project. So today's main focus is going to be to strip or undress the engine. Once we take care of that, then we can move the engine onto the engine stand that's right over there. So that means that today we're going to go ahead and disconnect and remove all of these parts. Today shouldn't be too difficult. It's just about making sure that all of the bolts go along with all of the parts. Just make sure everything is labeled. So let's go ahead and get started with today's video. Let me explain to you a little bit more in detail what I mean by stripping or undressing the engine and then what parts I'll be removing today. So we do have to remove the transmission, and I did reach out to Honey Badger just because I was a little bit unsure on how to remove the transmission without setting the balance off of the engine. So he did recommend that I pick up a transmission jack. So that's what that is there. I picked that one up at Harbor Freight. So that'll just make things a lot easier to just slide off the transmission without having any issues. We also have to remove the headers, these covers, the oil catch can, the engine harness and everything that goes with it, like the injectors, coils, things like that, the intake manifold, heater hoses, coolant hoses, the alternator. So once we're done removing all of those parts, I did receive the engine lift adapter, so that'll have to be bolted on the engine, and then we can use the engine hoist to support the engine. That way we can remove these 2 bolts, so there's one on each side. This will free the engine from the K-member. Once we're done with that, then we can finally put the engine on the engine stand. So easier said than done. I'm pretty sure I run into some issues because but just like with the dropping the engine video, if I have any issues, then I will come on here and then just let you guys know what the issue is and what I'm thinking about doing or what I did to solve it. So let's go ahead and get started. And I think I'll just start off with removing the headers. I'll probably do this in 2 steps just because if I just do this in 1 step, it'll just be pretty heavy with trying to hold this. So I think I'm just going to remove the cats first. So I'll remove that, and instead of disconnecting the O2 sensors from here, I'll just disconnect it from here. Once we have the cats removed, then we can move on to removing the headers and then we can proceed. So let's go ahead and get started. I can't even begin to imagine what it's like to do headers with the engine being inside the car, because right now with the engine being out, I still struggled. It was a pain removing these nuts off of those studs. It's probably my fault too because I didn't end up putting PB Blaster. So right now I ended up putting PB Blaster here on the driver's side header. So I'm just letting that sit there for a little while. Meanwhile, I speak to you guys, but it was such a pain. I'm so glad that I finally got them out. But like I said, can't even imagine. I'm very happy that I'm doing this with the engine being out, but there is something that I also did want to show you. So you guys have seen me do this in so many of my videos. So usually there was one of those nuts that I couldn't reach to when removing the headers. So I did have to use this wrench. You guys have seen this in many of my videos. What I usually do is I stack wrenches, and it has slipped on me before and it's hit my knuckles, and that really does hurt. For those of you that work on cars, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. So funny enough, Knuckle Buddy did send me this tool, and this has been so helpful. So instead of stacking wrenches, you no longer do that. You use this. So all these locations, all these indentations right here, that's where you end up putting the wrench. And they have this side, which is for the smaller wrenches, and then this side, which is for your larger wrench. Now I've had this for quite some time now. I just haven't had an opportunity to use it, and I honestly really didn't think that I would be using it with the GT350 engine rebuild project, but I did today. So I'm very glad, because this was a lifesaver, because I no longer want to be stacking on wrenches and just risking it from slipping and then hitting my knuckles. But now let's move on and let's remove the headers here from the driver's side, and then let's move on to detaching the trans. So I'll see you guys when it's time to do that. I just placed the trans jack directly under the transmission, so now we need to worry about these trans line, these cables, these wires, because I don't want to start unbolting this, trying to slide off the transmission, and then it just keeps on getting pulled back. So first off, these trans lines do have 2 brackets, so here's one, then here's another, so I do need to remove these, and then this can easily come off with the trans. And then all these other cables and wires, I also do need to disconnect because those lead back to the engine harness. So there's a couple sensors here, there's another one here on the other side. Once we're done with that, then there are a few bolts here, all throughout here, that I do also need to remove, and then we can finally, hopefully without any issues, just slide off the trans. So let's keep going. Let me tell you something, I was terrified removing this transmission off of the engine. I don't know why, but I think I was more terrified removing this transmission off of the engine than dropping the engine from the car. It just seemed pretty unstable. I was trying to pry it out and it just seemed like it didn't want to come off. Then finally it did. As soon as it came off, the engine dropped, and so did my heart, because I thought, man, this is the end. The engine is just going to tumble over, but it didn't. Luckily, everything went well. I was just a little bit worried because I was thinking, I'm really not sure if these 2 engine mounts are going to keep the engine balanced, but luckily it did. And I also think that since I do have a big block underneath the oil pan, then I also think that that helped as well. But glad that that scare is over. But now let me show you how this looks like. So here's the transmission that I just removed, and then here we also have the clutch and the flywheel in all of its glory. I also went ahead and just placed a jack here just underneath the oil pan, just a little bit, just to keep the engine balanced. But now moving forward, I think that everything else that we need to remove shouldn't be as dramatic as removing the transmission. But I mean, something always ends up going wrong, right? Like I said in the beginning of the video, we're going to try and remove as many parts and as many pieces that we can from the engine just to strip it. The hardest thing is going to be probably just lifting up the engine. So let's go ahead and keep going. think I'll be skipping a step, and that is removing the engine harness, because there's some sensors and some connections that are pretty hard to get to, so I think I'll just take care of that later. But as I was looking into raising and then attaching the engine to the engine stand, I quickly realized that this is in the way, so I will have to remove the clutch and the flywheel. Now I took a look at the service manual and they said to mark somewhere between the flywheel and then the pressure plate, so I already did that. And then it also has 6 bolts that you'll need to remove here from the clutch. The flywheel has 8, and then you also also have to remove them with even pressure. So I'll make sure to do that. Once these are off, then we can go ahead and chain up the engine, lift it up, and then attach it to the engine stand. So we're almost done. We're almost there, guys. So let's keep going. Well, just like you guys just saw right now, I completely just dropped the clutch disc. Honestly, I really wasn't anticipating this just falling, and then it did, and I was like, oh no. So it did end up cracking this area right here, this edge. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. It's cracked, so I'm almost certain that I can't reuse this clutch, but even if it hadn't dropped, I am not really sure how to tell the wear on this. So I don't know if this is good wear or bad wear, or if I did need a new clutch. So I'll have to look into that. But either way, that happened. I mean, something always goes wrong, right? But that was completely my fault. So now it's time to remove the flywheel. So I'll make sure I'll be extra careful, because I honestly don't want to drop any more things or to break anything. So let's keep going. So I had a second heart attack today. Once I removed the flywheel, then this engine completely rocked forward. I honestly didn't think that that flywheel was going to be that heavy, or that it was going to rock the engine. And I thought, once again, this is it. The engine is just going to come forward, but it didn't. But enough with the engine rocking, enough with the heart attacks. I was like, that is it. Enough scares for today, especially with that clutch. So I thought, you know what, let me just call in Chris. So then he came, and then he helped me with just putting this engine hoist here, and also chaining the engine hoist here to the engine lift adapter. So now we also lifted it, and you can see it is rocking, but it's safely and secured. So now I can go ahead and remove these 2 bolts here from the engine mount, and then after that, the engine will be free. We are making progress. The engine is finally on the engine stand, although I still have it tied up here to the engine hoist. But as you can see, there's no tension here. I just have it there just in case. But I did have to make a minor change. So there's this engine stand here that you guys had seen before, and now there's this other engine stand. And it is the next day, because yesterday when I was trying to figure this out on how to attach the engine to that engine stand, I quickly realized that it just wasn't going to work with this engine hoist. Let me show you why. So if you can see on this engine stand, these legs expand outwards, and if we look on this engine hoist, these legs expand outwards as well. So that just wasn't working out when I was just trying to attach it here, because I just couldn't get them close enough. But that was completely my fault. So then today I woke up really early. I went back to Harbor Freight and I picked up this one. I explained to them that I had made a mistake and purchased the wrong one. So the good thing is that they did tell me that I can go back and return this one, so that's good. But now that it's finally here, we can go ahead and remove the last remaining part. So I think there's 3 remaining parts. So we're going to take care of removing this engine harness. That's just like a complete spider all over the engine, the starter, and then the last part is going to be the alternator. And I think that's pretty much it. My main goal is just to remove as many parts as possible, because I just want to reduce the weight on the engine, especially because it's now on the engine stand, and 2, because I just don't want to have as many parts I need to remove for the next video. So let's keep going. We are finally done. So I was able to take out every single part and piece that I wanted to remove today. I'd say that everything was pretty easy. The only thing that kind of gave me some trouble was removing some clips, just because some were a little bit annoying, like these that go right here for the valve covers. But other than that, I think it went by great, except for dropping the clutch disc, but that was just completely my fault, and I still can't stop thinking about that because that could have just totally been avoided. But I mean, oh well, things happen. But now we are ready for part 3, which is going to be disassembling the block. I know that you guys have been looking forward to that. So have I. I'm very excited because now that we tear it apart, I can finally see what is the extent of the damage in the internals, which is something that I'm just so curious. The only thing that I need to do before that is actually need to get some tables, because once I disassemble the entire block, I will be putting all of the pieces in order on top of the tables, just so once I'm ready to rebuild the engine and just assemble it, then I can know where everything goes and then just assemble it back properly, because we don't want to mess that up, because that is very, very important. But other than that, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.